Good evening. Let's read before I get too tired. So, just like to go to my bed and reading about old aircrafts. Maybe I could find some in the Microsoft Flight Simulator. But I need a stronger computer. So I need half a minute to get to my bed.
English Electric Canberra. The English Electric Canberra is a British first-generation, jet-powered medium bomber. It was developed by English Electric during the mid to late 1940s in response to a 1944 Air Ministry requirement for a successor to the wartime de Havilland Mosquito fast bomber. Among the performance requirements for the type was an outstanding high-altitude bombing capability and high speed. These were partly accomplished by making use of newly developed jet propulsion technology. When the Canberra was introduced to service with the Royal Air Force, RAF, the type's first operator, in May 1951, it became the service's first jet-powered bomber. In February 1951, a Canberra set another world record when it became the first jet aircraft to make a non-stop transatlantic flight. Throughout most of the 1950s, the Canberra could fly at a higher altitude than any other aircraft in the world, and in 1957, a Canberra established a world altitude record of 70,310 feet, 21,430 m. Due to its ability to evade the early jet interceptor aircraft, and its significant performance advancement over contemporary piston-engined bombers, the Canberra became a popular aircraft on the export market, being procured for service in the air forces of many nations both inside and outside of the Commonwealth of Nations. The type was also license-produced in Australia by Government Aircraft Factories, GAF, and in the US by Martin as the B-57 Canberra. The latter produced both the slightly modified B-57A Canberra and the significantly updated B-57B. In addition to being a tactical nuclear strike aircraft, the Canberra proved to be highly adaptable, serving in varied roles such as tactical bombing and photographic and electronic reconnaissance. Canberras served throughout the Cold War, in the Suez Crisis, Vietnam War, Falklands War, Indo-Pakistani Wars, and numerous African conflicts. In several wars, each of the opposing sides had Canberras in its air force. The Canberra served for more than 50 years with some operators. In June 2006, the RAF retired the last 3 of its Canberras 57 years after its first flight. 3 of the Martin B-57 variant remain in service, performing meteorological and re-entry tracking work for NASA, as well as providing electronic communication, battlefield airborne communications node, testing for deployment to Afghanistan. Development, edit. Background, edit. Canberra PR.9XH135. During the Second World War, a desperate demand for bomber aircraft led to many aircraft being produced by secondary manufacturers via licensed manufacturing arrangements. The English Electric Company thus mass-produced thousands of piston-engined bombers, such as the Handley Page Hampden and Handley Page Halifax, and the firm became a well-established British aircraft manufacturer despite having little internal design experience. Sir George Nelson, the chairman of English Electric, decided that the company would seek to remain in the business and produce its own designs. In November 1943, the company was invited to participate in discussions over a prospective bomber that would take advantage of the newly developed jet propulsion technology. In 1944, Westland Aircraft's technical director and chief designer W.E.W. Petter had prepared a design study for a twin-engined fighter bomber, the P.1056, based on two fuselage-mounted Metrovic F.2 4/4-barrel engines. The aircraft used a relatively conventional aerodynamic design, Petter having determined that the necessary performance could be attained without adopting swept wings or a swept tail. The authorities doubted its suitability for operations from unprepared fields and at low altitude, but could see its potential as a bomber design. Numerous manufacturers refused to take on the design. Petter left Westland to join the English Electric Company in December 1944, where he was appointed by Nelson to form a design team and encouraged to develop his design. In 1945, English Electric formalized its own in-house aircraft design team to pursue this design. The Canberra had its formal origins in a 1944 requirement issued by the Air Ministry for a successor to the de Havilland Mosquito. This requirement, the initial revision being E.3/45, sought a high-altitude, high-speed bomber, which was to be equipped with no defensive armament. According to aviation historians Bill Guston and Peter Gilchrist, Air Ministry officials are alleged to have had difficulty defining what they sought for the proposed type, which led to several revisions of the requirement. Further specification refinements, including B.3/45 and B.5/47, issued further details such as a three-man crew and other features such as a visual bombing capability. Several British aircraft manufacturers submitted proposals to meet the requirement, including English Electric. The firm was among those companies to be shortlisted to proceed with development studies. By June 1945, the aircraft that was to become the Canberra bore many similarities to the eventual design, despite the placement of a single, centrally mounted turbojet engine. Petter had held discussions with Rolls-Royce Limited on the topic of the development of a scaled-up derivative of the Nene engine. In late 1945, the design was modified further with a pair of engines being adopted, instead, initially to be set in the wing roots and later to be mounted in a mid-wing position. This change was made principally due to center of gravity issues imposed by the position and weight of a heavy bomb load and centrally mounted single engine. The new engine position decreased the aircraft's weight by 13% and improved the aircraft's center of gravity, as well as improved accessibility to the engines and related accessories. Its downsides were slight thrust loss from the longer jet pipes and greater yaw during engine out instances. During the early stages of design, the aircraft had grown from being roughly the same size as the Mosquito to being around double its weight. Although jet-powered, the Canberra design philosophy was very much in the Mosquito mold, providing room for a substantial bomb load, fitting two of the most powerful engines available, and wrapping it in the most compact and aerodynamic package possible, an example being a leading edge formed of a single sheet of light alloy wrapped around to 40% of cord, sitting on redux-bonded stiffeners through which the ribs were passed, the panels secured with adjustable eye bolts, enabling a highly accurate wing profile to be maintained from the leading edge to main spar without any external joints or fastenings. Also in line with the Mosquito philosophy, the Canberra by design dispensed with defensive armament, which had historically proven unequal to fighter aircraft, and the resulting performance gain permitted the Canberra to avoid air-to-air combat entirely. On the 7th of January 1946, the Ministry of Supply placed a contract for the development and production of 4 English Electric A.1 aircraft. It continued to be known as the English Electric A.1 until it was given the name Canberra after the capital of Australia in January 1950 by Sir George Nelson, chairman of English Electric, as Australia had become the aircraft's first export customer. Prototypes and first flights, edit. The Air Ministry Specification B.3/45 had requested the production of 4 prototypes. On the 9th of January 1946, English Electric received a contract to produce 4 prototypes, which received the Society of British Aerospace Companies designation A.1. Work commenced on the construction of these prototype aircraft in that same year, which were all built on production jigs. Progress was slow, however, due to several factors, such as the protracted development of the Avon engine that powered the type. In October 1947, in response to Rolls-Royce's difficulties, English Electric elected to have the second prototype modified to use the existing Nene engine in place of the Avon. The implementation of post-war military cutbacks also served to slow development. Another external issue that affected development was the failure of the Telecommunications Research Establishment to produce the radar bombing system for the aircraft in a timely fashion. This required a redesign in 1947, changing the aircraft's nose to accommodate a glazed tip for visual bombing by a bomb aimer, which in turn required the cockpit to be restructured to facilitate the ejection system of the additional crew member. In 1948, the design team relocated to Warton Aerodrome, Lancashire, establishing a flight test organisation and assembly facilities there. Ultimately, the first of these prototypes, VN799, conducted its maiden flight on the 13th of May 1949. Piloted by Roland Beaumont, the aircraft is claimed to have handled well, with the exception of rudder overbalance. This initial flight was flown with Avon engines. The decision to perform the type's first flight with the Avon-equipped first prototype or the Nene-equipped second prototype, VN828, was not made until weeks beforehand. On the 9th of November 1949, the second prototype, VN828, the first to be equipped with the Nene engine, performed its first flight. The third and fourth followed within the following 8 weeks. Flight testing of the prototypes proved to be vice-free and required only a few modifications. The changes included the installation of a glazed nose to accommodate a bomb aimer, due to the advanced H-2S Mk9 bombing radar being unavailable for production. The turbojet engines were replaced by more powerful Rolls-Royce Avon RA3S, and distinctive teardrop-shaped fuel tanks were fitted under the wingtips. Refinements were also made following early flight testing to the rudder and elevator to reduce instances of buffeting, after which it is claimed that the Canberra handled much like a fighter, proving to be atypically maneuverable for a bomber. The project had found considerable support from the government in the late 1940s. In March 1949, in advance of the maiden flight of the first prototype, English Electric received an instruction to proceed for production. By the time the first prototype had flown, the Air Ministry had placed orders for 132 production aircraft in bomber, reconnaissance, and training variants. On the 21st of April 1950, the first production standard aircraft, designated as the Canberra B.2, conducted its maiden flight, piloted by Beaumont. Proving to be free of problems, this first flight was almost immediately followed by the mainstream manufacturing of production Canberras. In May 1951, the Canberra entered RAF Squadron service, number 101 Squadron being the first to receive the type. In a testament to the aircraft's benign handling characteristics, the transition program for the Canberra consisted of only 20 hours in the Gloucester Meteor and 3 hours in a dual-control Canberra trainer. Production and Licensed Manufacturing, edit. In July 1949, as English Electric was in the process of setting up production at Summersbury Aerodrome, a firm order was placed for 132 Canberras. The order consisted of 90 B.5/47 bomber-type aircraft, 34 PR.31/46 photo reconnaissance aircraft, and 8 T.2/49 trainer aircraft. On the 25th of June, 1950, what would become known as the Korean War broke out. This led to a surge of demand for the Canberra and the British government stepping in to establish a far greater level of wartime production. This led to a succession of orders for Canberra B.2s, the initial bomber variant, being placed with Avro, Handley Page, and Short Brothers. For British needs alone, English Electric produced 196 B.2s, Avro and Handley Page manufactured 75 each, and Short completed 60 aircraft. The B.2 variant of the Canberra exceeded the numbers built of any other version. Other nations, notably Australia and the United States of America, also ordered large numbers of Canberras. Martin EB-57B. In the United States, the U.S. Air Force had identified the need to replace the obsolete B-26 Invader, and had determined that, at the time, no home-produced aircraft designs could get close to what the Canberra could already offer. Following a competition against rivals such as the Martin XB-51, USAF decided to order a total of 403 Canberras. These aircraft were license-built by Glenn L. Martin Company as the B-57 Canberra. Martin developed several versions of the aircraft themselves. The first examples were identical to the original English Electric aircraft, following which tandem crew seating was introduced, but later B-57 models were considerably modified. Australia had been interested in the Canberra early on, which had led to the aircraft being named after the Australian capital city. Particular interest had at one time been expressed in a potential Rolls-Royce Tay-powered version of the aircraft. The government aircraft factories locally assembled 48 for the Royal Australian Air Force. These aircraft were broadly similar to the British B.2. Changes included the adoption of a modified leading edge, increased fuel capacity, and room for 3 starter cartridges, although in practice, all 3 cartridges would sometimes fire, leading to the triple starter units being loaded singly. In addition, Australian-built Canberras used a higher proportion of Australian and US-sourced components. In total, 901 Canberras were manufactured by the various UK-based aircraft manufacturers. When combined with overseas license production operations, the overall global production for the Canberras totaled 1,352 aircraft. With a maximum speed of 470 knots, 870 km per hour, 540 miles per hour, a standard service ceiling of 48,000 feet, 14,600 m, and the ability to carry a 3.6-ton, 7,900-pound payload, the Canberra proved to be an instant success on the domestic and export markets. It was built in 27 versions that equipped a total of 35 IAF squadrons, and was exported to more than 15 countries: Australia, Argentina, Chile, Ecuador, Ethiopia, France, India, New Zealand, Pakistan, Peru, Rhodesia, South Africa, Sweden, Venezuela, and West Germany. Photo reconnaissance and specialized roles, edit. During the latter part of the Second World War, strategic reconnaissance missions performed by the RAF had been carried out by the de Havilland Mosquito. In 1946, the Air Ministry issued specification PR.31/46 seeking a jet-powered replacement for the Mosquito. To meet the requirement, the B.2 design was modified by adding a 14-inch, 36 centimeters, bay forward of the wing behind the cockpit to house 7 cameras. It also had an additional fuel tank in the forward part of the bomb bay and only needed a 2-man crew. The prototype, designated PR.3, first flew on the 19th of March, 1950, followed by the first of 35 production aircraft on the 31st of July, 1952. In December 1952, the PR.3 entered IAF service, when number 540 Squadron IAF began converting from its Mosquito PR.34 force. The Canberra PR.3 was the first aircraft to be designed for the IAF purely to perform photo reconnaissance missions. The initial Canberra PR.3 model was shortly succeeded by the improved PR.7 variant, which featured greater fuel capacity via wing storage, the more powerful RA.7 model of the Avon engine, and Max Air anti-lark braking system. The Canberra PR.9 was the final photo reconnaissance version. This aircraft was furnished with a new crew compartment, a redesigned inner wing section, and much more powerful RA.24 Avons. In later service, bomber models of the Canberra were often converted with cameras and other equipment suited for reconnaissance purposes. To enable crews to convert to flying the Canberra, a trainer version was developed to meet Air Ministry specification T.2/49. On the 12th of June, 1951, the prototype, designated T.4, conducted its first flight. It was the same basic design as the B.2 apart from the introduction of side-by-side seating for the pilot and the instructor and the replacement of the glazed nose with a solid nose. The first production T.4 flew on the 20th of September, 1953 and the variant entered service with number 231 Operational Conversion Unit IF in early 1954. In addition to those assigned to the Operational Conversion Unit, all of the B.2 equipped bomber squadrons received at least one T.4 for training purposes. In addition to the IF, other users adopted the Canberra in the trainer role. The Indian Air Force operated a number of T.4 aircraft for conversion training purposes. The RAF adopted the Australian-built Canberra T.21 model, which was broadly similar to the T.4. Argentina procured a pair of T.64 trainers during the 1970s. From 1960s onwards, increasing numbers of bomber-oriented Canberras were deemed surplus, as newer, faster ground attack aircraft were introduced. This led to such aircraft being rebuilt to serve in various alternative roles, including unpiloted target aircraft, radar trainers, target tugs, radar calibration aircraft, and electronic countermeasures trainers. In addition, some Canberras that had originally been manufactured for the high-altitude bomber mission were re-equipped for low-altitude, ground attack missions. Design, edit. The English Electric Canberra is a bomber aircraft powered by 2 jet engines, and able to fly at high altitudes. An early prototype operated by Rolls-Royce regularly flew to 63,000 feet, where the usable speed range, Coffin Corner, was only 25 knots, during Avon engine test flights. The overall design has been described as being of a simple nature, somewhat resembling a scaled-up Gloucester Meteor fighter, except for its use of a mid-wing. The Canberra principally differed from its preceding piston-powered wartime bombers by its use of twin Rolls-Royce Avon turbojet engines. The fuselage was circular in cross-section, tapered at both ends, and cockpit aside, entirely without protrusions. The line of the large, low aspect ratio wings was broken only by the tubular engine nacelles. The Canberra had a 2-man crew in a fighter-style cabin with a large blown canopy. but delays in the development of the intended automatic radar bomb sight resulted in the addition of a bomb aimer's position housed within the nose. The pilot and navigator were positioned in a tandem arrangement on Martin Baker ejection seats. Instrument panel of a Canberra cockpit, 2006. The wing is of single-spar construction that passes through the aircraft's fuselage. The wingspan and total length of the Canberra are almost identical at just under 65 feet, 20 m. Outboard of the engine nacelles, the wing has a leading edge sweep of 4 degrees and trailing edge sweep of 14 degrees. All flight controls are manual, using push rods rather than cables, but are otherwise conventional. These actuate the aircraft's flight control surfaces, including shrouded nose ailerons, 4-section, conventional, split-type flaps, and atypical air brakes which comprise 40 hydraulically raised fingers located on the top and bottom surfaces of the wings. Swept wings were considered, but not adopted, since the expected operational speeds did not warrant them and because they could have introduced new aerodynamic problems into what was otherwise anticipated to be a straightforward replacement for RAF Hawker Typhoon and Westland Whirlwind fighter bombers. The fuselage of the Canberra is of semi-monocoque construction with a pressurized nose compartment. The whole lower section of the fuselage is taken up by the sizable bomb bay with a pair of hydraulically driven doors. The Canberra's undercarriage used a simple arrangement, the main landing gear being equipped with a single outboard mounted wheel and the nose gear being a twin wheel arrangement. Due to the use of a new alloy, DTD 683, the undercarriage suffered from stress corrosion cracking. Cracks would appear within only a few years. The hazard posed by an undercarriage collapse during landing led the RAF to institute regular inspections, at first using radiography before moving to more effective and reliable ultrasound technology. The Canberra structure is mainly metal, with only the forward portion of the tail fin made from wood. Thrust was provided by a pair of 6,700 lbf, 30 kN, axial flow Rolls-Royce Avon turbojet engines. They were mounted in the midsection of the wings using tubular trusses and links between the main mounts and the adjacent leading edge of the wing. Each engine drove a 6 kW generator for the aircraft 28 VDC electrical system, a hydraulic pump for the aircraft hydraulics, and a bleed air system for cabin pressurization. Fuel was carried in 2 internally supported self-sealing fuel tanks and a lace-supported bag in the upper fuselage. The manufacturer specified that Kaufman engine starters should be used for engine starting. An improvised method using compressed air was discouraged by Rolls-Royce, but some operators used air starting successfully, the benefit being significant cost savings over the use of cartridges. Various avionics were installed on the Canberra, many with their origins during the Second World War. They included GH navigation, Rebecca beacon interrogation distance measuring equipment, very high-frequency radio, radio compass, radar altimeter, identification friend or foe, and orange putter radar warning receiver. Perhaps the most crucial of the mission systems was the H-2S automatic radar bomb sight, which was mounted in the nose. Delays in the development of the H-2S intended for the Canberra led to early aircraft being fitted with a T.2 optical sight for visual bombing. The optical sight was considerably inferior to radar aiming when used from high altitudes. The value of the Canberra experience cannot be overestimated. It is the only modern tactical strike and reconnaissance aircraft in service with the RAF and many other air forces. More Canberra aircraft are in service with foreign countries than the Viscount, which holds the record for British civil aircraft. This is due to the flexibility of the Canberra in its operational roles and performance. Manufacturer's brochure, 1957. The Canberra could deploy many conventional weapons, Typical weapons used were two 50-pound, 500-pound, and 1,000-pound bombs. The total bomb load could weigh up to 10,000 pound, 4,500 kilograms. Two bomb bays are housed within the fuselage, normally enclosed by conventional clamshell doors. A rotating door was substituted for these on the Martin-built B-57 Canberras. Additional stores of up to 2,000 pounds,